Senator Joe Manchin received a rude awakening when confronted by a climate group during a talk at Harvard University. Manchin found himself in a heated exchange which saw a climate protester being thrown to the ground.
Joe Manchin sold our futures and he's gotten rich doing it. You sick. How dare you? You sold our futures. I'm not going to sit down. You've received more funding from fossil fuels than any other senator.
You made millions out of your position. You drive a Maserati.
The pipeline goes right through West Virginia, which are your constituents.
These people came here to support this pipeline. The pipeline they should support because it has energy going to...
Not your futures, not your profits.
Harvard did not say if the man who pushed the protester was with Harvard or Manchin. The Harvard Crimson, the paper, reported after the incident that the man who threw the climate protester was an aide to Senator Joe Manchin. Manchin was a guest speaker at a Kennedy School Institute of Politics study group to discuss his centrist politics on Friday. Protesters criticized Manchin for taking more money from fossil fuel companies than any other senator from 2021 to 2022. According to Open Secrets, he's now 6th on that list. Harvard issued the following statement, quote, a Harvard University police officer ordered the protesters to leave the Kennedy School campus, and the protesters complied. Senator Manchin continued his discussion with IOP students after the disruption, but Harvard University Police and Kennedy School are reviewing the incident. So this video provoked an extensive conversation on the propriety of protest. Folks weighing in that it was inappropriate to curse at Senator Manchin, use the expletive that the protester used, and others pointing out that being assaulted in that way could result in serious injuries, and there's at least as much impropriety in throwing a student to the ground as there is in using colorful language. What do you make of it?
Yeah, the fact that he swore at Joe Manchin doesn't give anyone license to rough him up. It looked like they were crashing an event and preventing the event from proceeding. So if they did not heed warnings to leave, it would have been appropriate for the relevant authorities to escort them out or force them out. You know, that was just a clip, so I can't judge exactly. That looked too rough to me and too abrupt, rather than having the designated security official escort them out. But obviously they don't, they can protest outside, they can protest Joe Manchin as he moves from one building to one room or something, but he should be allowed to, you know, speak and his mind, say what he's going to say.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, climate protesters have gotten a lot of kind of negative coverage, whether it's the story about various climate protesters going to museums and dousing various liquids on artworks. They're behind protective glass. Artworks aren't actually damaged in any of those protests. Or the story we covered recently about the millionaire or billionaire who bought a lot of art and said he was going to destroy it if there was not a ceasefire in Gaza. And it is interesting that while protesters seem to have managed to figure out how to get coverage, the coverage is disproportionately on the nature of their protests and kind of tone policing the protests as opposed to any of the underlying issues. And David Dayen over at the American Prospect pointed this out a couple of days ago, saying online, you know, tweeting, climate activists harassing Joe Manchin has triggered a tired debate about the role of protest. There's almost no discussion of Biden nominating a Manchin staffer to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which approves fossil fuel infrastructure. So pointing out that there does seem to be a bigger problem here, which is that Joe Biden's behavior has not tracked with his messaging on being someone that folks were told they should vote for back in 2020 because of his ability and willingness to meaningfully act on climate reform. That was core to the argument, his electoral argument back in 2020. And over the last 3 years now, there has been a lot of frustration from the climate community about the ways in which he seems to have reneged on those commitments.
So Joe Manchin obviously was being considered, courted for the kind of no labels ticket, which is supposed to involve a Democrat and a Republican. I believe it was maybe Larry Hogan was speculated to be a potential addition to that, the Republican governor from a blue state from the Northeast. And there was a lot of chatter about that, and it appears to have come to nothing, and it does not seem like, because no labels is, I think, very close to out of time to have any sort of impact on the 2024 campaign.
Yeah. Look, I think that's right. I don't think that we're going to see anything from him on that. And again, this question of who is this for, who wants this, given how he has been Biden's kind of bête noire for the last 3 years, obstructing his legislative opportunities when there were majorities in the House. Again, who is this?
I mean,
who's asking
he's
for
a senator from a Trump plus 8 trillion state, right? He's trying to distance himself from Biden, from Democrats, from liberals as much as possible in some, desperate attempt to maintain popularity in a deeply red state.
Well, this question of protests, it's going to be dragging following Biden this entire election season. It was reported by a number of outlets, including NBC earlier this week, that the Biden team is basically avoiding college campuses to avoid getting these kinds of confrontations. There was a super viral video going around of AOC, and it appears to be her partner leaving a movie theater yesterday and getting followed by peace activists who were asking her why she wouldn't commit to using the word ceasefire. She says that she does use the word ceasefire, and they have a pretty heated back and forth where she launches a bunch of expletives back at them as they kind of walk down the escalators out of the theater and out into the street. And it does seem like there is something that has shifted, where the public is perhaps sufficiently frustrated by the failure of traditional paths, democratic tools to actually influence politics. Perhaps they're not seeing themselves reflected electorally in local and federal elections. They seem to even be having discontent. Some folks, obviously, I'm not going to claim that these protesters are representative of any majority, but some folks are even discontent with the more progressive elected officials like AOC. It could be that the perceived exigency of the crisis in Gaza, with starvation looming in the way it is, and the 30,000 people having died the way they have died, that is causing there to be some kind of shift. But we're really seeing a pattern of consistent protest pressure that is literally changing the campaign technique of the ostensible Democratic candidate here in the race in a way that might not enable him to, frankly, do the kind of effective campaigning that typically leads to him having overwhelming support among young voters.
Yeah, it'd be one thing if sticking it to activist type, progressive lefty people was making Democrats or making Biden more popular. I would argue that it's making, for instance, John Fetterman more popular in his state, but it's clearly not this is not working for Biden's reelection campaign. He's losing progressives, he's losing activists, he's losing young people, he's losing minority support, and he is not picking up among moderates, independents, Republicans. Those people all dislike him more than they did 4 years ago, or they at least don't think he should be president, or they have concerns about the age and the other things. They don't like his policies. So he's in a position where he just seems to be losing everyone, which is why he is currently polling the worst he's ever polled against his presumptive rival, Donald Trump.
Right. And we're at that point in the election cycle where polls are predictive. Yep. Democrats were making arguments for some time that polls this far out might not have that much of a predictive effect. Now we're in the zone, and there was a very lengthy New Yorker article yesterday that kind of gave a gloss and some insight into what the Biden administration might be thinking about internally, how they're responding to these pressures. And it does seem from that article and some other reporting that internally they still seem to be believing that when Election Day comes, Gaza, some of these other issues aren't going to be front of mind, and that folks will be afraid enough of Trump and desirous enough of maintaining democracy that they're going to pull the lever for him. We'll see.
We'll see. More Rising right after this.